In this short video, I'd like to continue talking about the different forms that you'll find in the sonata cycle and specifically focus on the first movement, which is in what's called sonata allegro form. So, to be honest, I really don't think that I can add any more information about sonata form. I think Craig Wright's lectures are really great. Last week's module, you should have seen lecture number 9, in which he introduces sonata form. And in this week's learning module, I'm going to go ahead and put that up there again. And also we'll put up the video lecture number 10, which goes into listening for different characteristics inside sonata allegro form. So please watch that. The purpose of this video will just be to show you some visuals that I think you'll find helpful. Okay, first of all, sonata allegro form, or also just known as sonata form, is a type of form. This was developed in the classical era by the classical composers. It's used almost always as the form for the first movement in a symphony, in a sonata, a string quartet, a serenade, and so on. Almost always this will be the form for the first movement. On page 173 in your book, you'll see a diagram for sonata allegro form, which I think you'll find helpful. The only thing that I added underneath this diagram are the letters ABA to show you that it's kind of similar to ABA. It's actually a lot more complicated, but here's how it's like, sort of like ternary form. So the exposition is the first section in sonata allegro form, and you see that it's made up of a couple different thematic groups that are signified by the kind of a light purple and then a red line to show you that there are different themes in different key areas. And then you'll see in the recapitulation how those themes come back. In the middle, the development, this is a contrasting section. You can think of that as the B section. So in that sense, sonata allegro form is kind of like ABA. And this is why Craig Wright put sonata form here after introducing ABA, because there is a lot more to it. Okay, if you remember back to last week, in listening for different characteristic features of the classical style, if you boil it down to two key concepts, one is that the movement will have natural simplicity, logic and balance, proportion, and that kind of thing. And second, there's also the inclusion of variety or contrast. So if you look at the exposition, you'll see that there's two different ideas. And you can see that by the fact they're different color. Of course, the first theme will be in what's called the tonic key. That's why there's a Roman numeral 1 underneath there to show you, okay, if you're in the key of C, the first theme will be in the key of C. If you're in the key of G, the first theme will be in the key of G. The second theme is usually in the dominant key, and you can figure that out by just counting up 5. If the piece was in a minor key, then the second theme is usually in what's called the relative major. And Craig Wright explains that, and you can also read about it in our book. What that means is that if it starts out, say, G minor, it will go in the second theme up to the related major. That's the major key that has the same key signature as the minor key. So in the case of G minor, B flat major would be the relative major key. They both have 2 flats in the key signature. In other words, if the first theme is in a minor key, the second theme will usually be in what's called the third chord in the scale. Do you need to hear that or know that? Not really. I'm not going to ask you to tell me which chord is used for which theme. Well, I would like you to know the first theme's in the tonic, but what I wanted to point out was that they're different. So in classical piece, you're going to have some kind of variety. Last week, you heard the Mozart Little G Minor Symphony, which was very syncopated in a minor key, and you heard from my video lecture a little bit of Symphony Number 40, and in both cases, they had two different themes. So that's what you will hear in the exposition. That little black, what looks like steps or staircase, is called a transition or a bridge. And the function of the transition or bridge is to take you to a new key area. That's called the bridge or transition. After the transition ends, boom, you're in a new key area. And that's where the second theme starts. The closing theme or themes would be in the same key as the second theme. And there you will find a cadence at the end, and it'll sound like this is the end of a section. Those big dots there are repeat signs, and so usually the exposition is going to go back and repeat again. An exception would be in an opera overture, for example, in the overture to Don Giovanni, there is no repeat sign in the exposition, it just goes straight into the development. In the development section, as the name indicates, there's a further working out or developing of the thematic material. These themes can be extended and varied, or in the case of Beethoven and sometimes Mozart, the themes can be broken down into smaller fragments or what are called motives. Dramatic confrontation can occur here, as when you have several themes sounding together, fighting for your attention. So as it's pointed out in the book, there's contrapuntal possibilities in this section. The development section is the stormiest of all, not just because you might hear counterpoint, but also because of the fact that the music keeps modulating. Those jagged lines are really appropriate to give you that visual for the tension that you'll hear in the development section. There's a word that you'll see at the end of the development called a retransition, and what that is it's the dominant chord, and it signals to your ears that the music's going to go somewhere that you can kind of expect. And so what happens in the recapitulation is you'll hear a return to the first theme. It's not always exactly like you hear it at the beginning of the exposition, but sometimes it is. Anyway, that theme returns in the tonic key, followed by some more jagged lines. This bridge or transition in the recapitulation actually it's not going to modulate. It's going to stay in the tonic key. And so when we get to the second theme, we'll see that number 1, that Roman numeral 1, which means that now the second theme is going to come back in the tonic key. This is how the recapitulation is different. And in fact, Mozart really liked development. Sometimes his recapitulations had a longer transitional section. If you've studied in philosophy Hegel's dialectic, I read somewhere that sonata allegro form is kind of similar. I really am no expert on this Hegel's dialectic, but I recall it has something to do with solving an argument or a dispute. And if you think of sonata allegro form as being this, it's not a rigid form, but it's a form that rather serves to shape and unify contrasting ideas. In the recapitulation, the fact that the second theme comes back in the tonic key, it's kind of like, okay, I'm a different theme with a different character, but coming back in the same key as the first theme is sort of, I don't know, it just gives it a feeling of reconciliation. The closing theme will stay in the tonic, and then you'll hear a cadence, and it may sound like the piece is over. Oftentimes there's an additional, what's called a coda. Coda means tail in Italian. Usually in the hands of Haydn and Mozart, they were pretty short, may just be a couple, 2, 3 measures of closing chords going back and forth between the dominant and the tonic. Excuse me. Beethoven liked to add longer codas, and in his third symphony, actually, his coda is longer than the exposition itself. So it depends on who wrote it, but usually you'll expect a coda. Okay, that is really all I have to say, except for please listen to Wright's lectures if you haven't, because I think they're really good, especially tying in the listening to all this. And then also, you guys have several examples of sonata form. I would suggest the first one that you listen to should be the first movement of A Little Night Music, Eine kleine Nachtmusik. It's short, and it's a really good example. I'm going to post an alternate recording of that because I think the visuals are a little bit better. You also have the, excuse me, Mozart's G minor symphony, the first movement, which is also in sonata allegro form. And if you're interested, Beethoven, his Symphony Number 5 you have as well. In fact, both the first and fourth movements are in sonata allegro form. So in our book, you have multiple examples. I hope this makes sense, and if not, please let me know. Thank you.